Happy Halloween, everyone. Today is October 31st, 2020, which means that October is about to end and November is about to begin. That also means that Election Day is right around the corner. In fact, Election Day is only 3 days away because it is on November 3rd, 2020, and today is October 31st, 2020. So October's about to end, November's about to begin, and Election Day is almost here. 3 more days. That is basically nothing. And because the election is so close by now, in fact, a lot of the votes have already been casted because of early voting. Around 80 to 90 million votes have already been casted. Over 80 million votes have been casted for the presidential election. So a lot of the votes have already been casted for either Biden or Trump or a third party candidate. And November 3rd is just when the voting period ends. But since election day is so close by, I decided that I would use this video to talk about all of the most recent polls taken not only at the national level but also at the state level. So let's begin with that now. I'm going to look at the national level, the general popular vote polls with Biden versus Trump first. So I'm going to look at that now. I'm going to look at the polling average of that and then based on that talk about why Biden has a much better chance of winning. So I'm opening that up now. Here it says Biden, on average, has a 7.8 percentage point lead over Donald Trump. So there have been at least a dozen polls taken in the past week, and literally all of them have Biden winning. The worst poll for Biden still has him 3 percentage points ahead of Trump, the worst one. And the best ones have him ahead of Trump by 11 to 12 percentage points. But on average, it's around 8 percentage points. On average, Biden has an 8-point percentage lead ahead of Trump. So that gap is pretty big. Trump has an 8-point deficit in the polls that is really hard to overcome. And back in 2016, the gap was nowhere near this big. In 2016, the gap between Hillary Clinton and Donald Trump was only around 3 percentage points. Hillary Clinton was only around 3 percentage points ahead of Trump. And on election day, Hillary Clinton won the popular vote by around 2 percentage points. So the polls were actually not that far off in 2016, despite what a lot of people say. So if you take the trend in the same direction in 2020 as what happened in 2016 with the polls, you would expect Biden to win the popular vote by around at least 5 percentage points, if not more. And if that is to happen, if Biden wins the popular vote by 5 percentage points, it is almost impossible for him not to win the Electoral College. If he wins the popular vote by like 7 or 8 percentage points, then it's basically impossible for him to not win the Electoral College as well. But if he wins the popular vote by only 3 to 4 percentage points, there's the chance that he could still lose the Electoral College if Trump wins the right states. So we've looked at the general election data. Now let's look at recent polls at each state. So we're going to take a look at polls taken just in the last 4 or 5 days, polls released in the last few days. With Iowa, you have Trump ahead by a few percentage points in some of these polls, but in other polls, it's basically tied. And Arizona, most of the polls have Biden up by a few percentage points, but a couple have the race neck and neck, or some even have Trump ahead. But Arizona, I think, is more likely to go to Biden than Trump. Iowa, on the other hand, is more likely to vote for Trump than Biden. Nebraska's 2nd district, there was a poll there recently that was released today by Emerson. Biden's up by 3 percentage points there. 3 polls from Wisconsin came out today. All 3 of them have Biden up, and one of them even has Biden ahead by 12 percentage points, which is quite a lot. Pennsylvania, 1 poll came out today, Biden up by 5. North Carolina, 1 poll today, Biden up by 6. Virginia, which isn't even in contention at this point, Biden's basically guaranteed to win that state, and he's up by 11 in that state, according to a Roanoke College poll. And there's a Utah poll that came out today. Trump is only up by 7 percentage points, surprisingly, in Utah. Utah's a state that I've given Trump a safe win in every single prediction video that I've made. So it's kind of surprising that he's only up by 7 percentage points. And then there was a general election poll that came out today that included George Jorgensen, the Libertarian nominee, and Howie Hawkins, the Green Party nominee. George Jorgensen only got 1%. Howie Hawkins basically got 0%. And there were actually some Senate polls that came out today as well. And most of them are spelling good news for the Democrats and spelling bad news for the Republicans. In the Iowa Senate race, a poll shows Johnny Ernst up 4 points against Greenfield. A North Carolina Senate poll shows Cal Cunningham ahead by 3 percentage points against Tom Tillis, which means that Cal Cunningham has a better chance of winning that Senate seat than Tom Tillis. Michigan Senate, Peters is up by 12 percentage points against James. that Senate seat, I said in my prediction video, was likely to go for the Democrats and not for the Republicans. Same with the Arizona Senate seat. Mark Kelly is up by 7 percentage points against Martha McSally for that Senate seat, according to a CNN poll. And that seat is most likely going to be won by Mark Kelly. Same thing with the Michigan Senate poll. That was by CNN, and that shows Peters up by 12 percentage points. Virginia Senate, I didn't even think this is in contention. I think it's a guaranteed win for the Democrats, which in this case is Warner, and he is up by 16 percentage points, according to this Roanoke College poll. And then Utah governor, there's a poll that came out today, but the Republican nominee is up by 25 percentage points. No surprise there. Nobody ever expected the Democratic nominee to win that race. And then there's this one poll for New Mexico's 2nd congressional district, where the Republican nominee is up by 2 percentage points. So those are all the polls released today. I will look at polls from from the past couple days now. So yesterday, a poll was released for both Georgia and Florida, both having Trump ahead by a couple percentage points. 3 polls were released for North Carolina yesterday. 2 of them have Biden up, one has Trump up. And then Nevada, there's a poll that came out yesterday that has Biden up by 2. And then there were a few general election polls, but they all have Biden up by multiple percentage points. And then the Georgia Senate race, this one poll shows that it's a dead tie between Perdue and Ossoff, which is surprising because Georgia is a more conservative state, so it's pretty surprising that the race is neck and neck between the Democrat and the Republican. North Carolina Senate, 3 polls came out yesterday for that. All 3 of them show Cal Cunningham up. The best one for Cal Cunningham has him 10 percentage points again. 10 percentage points ahead of Tom Tillis, which is quite a lot. And then there was a Georgia special Senate election poll that came out yesterday that has Warnock ahead by 12 percentage points, but that is because the Republicans split the vote between 2 candidates, while the Democrats have all of their votes, or most of their votes, consolidated into one candidate, which in this case is Warnock. And then for the North Carolina governor, there were 2 polls that came out for that race yesterday. Both of them have the Democratic nominee, which is also the incumbent governor, Cooper, up by over 10 percentage points. One of them 11, one of them 19. And then, here's an interesting poll, and here's why. New Jersey's 2nd congressional district, which has Jeff Van Drew versus Kennedy. And here's the thing that makes this interesting. Jeff Van Drew originally got elected to Congress as a Democrat back in 2018. But then, in the middle of his term, he switched parties. It was during the impeachment trials. He switched from being a Democrat to being a Republican. I think the reason was something along the lines of him not being satisfied with how Democrats handled impeachment. He wasn't happy that the Democrats were going after impeachment, trying to impeach Trump, so he decided to switch political parties from being a Democrat to being a Republican. So now he's up for re-election in the 2nd congressional district in New Jersey, but this time as a Republican and not a Democrat. But that choice might not have been good for him because he is down in this poll by 1 percentage point. And then there was a poll for Florida's 13th district that shows the Democratic nominee ahead by 16 percentage points. So these are all the polls from the last 2 days. There's quite a lot of them, but the general takeaway is that Biden's guaranteed to win the popular vote at this point. It's almost completely inconceivable that Trump wins the popular vote. Even when Trump ran a much better campaign 4 years ago, he still lost the popular vote then. There's almost no way that he can win the popular vote now. Even the Electoral College is not looking good for Trump, but he has a slightly better chance of winning that than the popular vote. At this point, though, the popular vote is basically a lost cause for Donald Trump. Not that it matters, but he is not going to get more votes than Joe Biden. I can say that with almost 100% certainty at this point. And then for the Rust Belt states, all 4 of the Rust Belt states favor Biden over Trump. But in 2016, the polls also showed Hillary being favored over Trump in the 2016 polls, but that's not what actually happened on election day. The polls signaled that Hillary Clinton in 2016 would win the Rust Belt states, but on election day, Trump won 3 of the 4 Rust Belt states, so we have to keep a lookout on that. But the other thing is that the margin between Joe Biden and Donald Trump now in the Rust Belt states is a lot bigger than the margin between Clinton and Trump in the Rust Belt states 4 years ago. So keep that in mind also. But we'll just see in 3 days because that is how much time is left. It's barely any time at all. I'll look through some of the polls from 2 days ago, which is October 29th. And the general election polls obviously have Biden up. The Florida polls have Biden up. Minnesota polls have Biden up. There's one Iowa poll that has Trump up, but only by 1 percentage point. One Arizona poll has Trump up by 4 percentage points, but that might be an outlier. North Carolina polls have Biden up. New Hampshire polls obviously have Biden up. New Hampshire, I've given in every prediction video that I've made a likely win for Biden, but I think it's basically guaranteed for Biden at this point. I don't think Trump will be able to win New Hampshire at this point. Ohio, even though I give, in my prediction videos, I give that state to Trump. Ohio, for Trump versus Biden, in the Quinnipiac poll, says that Biden is 5 percentage points ahead of Trump in the state of Ohio. And then there was a random poll from Alabama, but obviously Trump was up by quite a lot there. No surprise there. Alabama's a pretty conservative state. And there's a few other polls here that are about Senate races, like the Iowa Senate race, Arizona Senate race, so on and so forth. Minnesota Senate race favors Tina Smith, the incumbent, the Democratic incumbent. The Iowa Senate race favors Johnny Ernst, the Republican incumbent. Arizona Senate race, despite not being the incumbent, Mark Kelly is strongly favored to win that race. Despite Martha McSally being the Republican incumbent, the Democratic challenger Mark Kelly is a lot more likely to win this Senate race. Same with the North Carolina Senate race. It looks like Cal Cunningham has a better chance of winning the Senate race as the Democratic challenger instead of Tom Tillis, the Republican incumbent, which I find surprising, especially considering the recent scandal that Cal Cunningham got himself involved in. But hey, the polls show that Cal Cunningham has a better chance of winning than Tom Tillis. That's pretty interesting, but we'll just have to see. I mean, I wouldn't be surprised if Cal Cunningham won that race. North Carolina is basically a swing state, and there's a pretty good chance that North Carolina could vote for Biden in this presidential election. Granted, there's a slightly higher chance that it votes for Trump in my opinion, but I'm really not sure. We just have to see. I'm basically on the edge for North Carolina, whether it goes for Biden or Trump. Same with Florida. Florida, North Carolina, I'm on the edge for both of them. They could honestly go either way. I would not be remotely surprised if they went for either Biden or Trump. Texas Senate race, Cornyn up against MJ Hagar, no surprise there, but Cornyn is only ahead of MJ Hagar by 5 percentage points. But I guess that's not too surprising when you consider that in 2018, Ted Cruz only won his Senate race by 2 percentage points against Beto O'Rourke. Ted Cruz was the Republican incumbent, Beto O'Rourke was the Democratic challenger. Similarly, John Cornyn is the Republican incumbent, MJ Hagar is the Democratic challenger. You had one more poll for the Georgia Senate special election. Once again, Warnock is ahead by quite a bit, but that's because the two Republican candidates split the votes, while the Democrats consolidate the votes into one candidate. So the Democrat is up in these polls, but the way that these special elections work in the state of Georgia, I don't think that'll be a problem, the Republicans splitting the votes. So, because only two people can make it to the final round, so most likely it'll be Warnock and one of the Republicans, but we just have to see which Republican it'll be. Currently, the incumbent Loeffler is running for re-election, but she might not actually win a re-election. It might be the other Republican, or it might be Warnock. So we just have to see. New Hampshire Senate, Democrats up by quite a lot. The Democratic nominee is up by over 10 percentage points, Shaheen. She is almost guaranteed to win the Senate race. I've basically given it a safe win for Shaheen in all my prediction videos. And then Virginia Senate, once again, Warner up by quite a lot. Pretty safe for Democrats. Alabama Senate, despite being the incumbent, Doug Jones is most likely going to lose that Senate race. New Jersey, no surprise there, Cory Booker's up by a ton. 30 percentage points against the Republican nominee. North Carolina governor, both polls from October 29th show the incumbent, the Democratic incumbent, Cooper, ahead by around 10 percentage points. And then you have some polls for the New Hampshire governor, which show the incumbent, the Republican incumbent, Sununu, up by over 20 percentage points, which I find kind of surprising considering that New Hampshire, at the Senate level, votes for Democrats more than Republicans, but at the presidential level, is basically a swing state, but still votes for Democrats more than Republicans. Then you have some congressional races from New Hampshire that polls were taken for. And for the first district, it's basically split even, but for the second district, the Democratic nominee is favored to win. So these are all the polls that were taken from the past 3 days. All of this was just from the past 3 days, but there were like at least 50 of these polls, if not like 100. So yeah, the polling companies have been really busy, but hey, I guess that's a good thing. We'll have more data. I think the polls will be more accurate at the state level now than they were 4 years ago, just because there's a lot more of them now.